Three, two, one.
All righty. Good to see Tom Murphy, Joe Bianca, and Jason here from good old sunny Fort Lauderdale. I had the thought, guys. I mean, we're all adults. I'd like to think we're all pretty seasoned in terms of the ups and downs, volatility, the ebbs and flows of horse racing. But I did have the thought. I'm not going to lie. Monday morning, like, you know what? Maybe we'll scrap the podcast this week. We could just skip it. Joe, I'll start with you. Not that I've been whining and complaining 24/7 over the last few days, but dude, I mean, just last weekend minus, glimpse here and there, a Cajun Gold or so. It was a tough one, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I started with West Point at the beginning of 2023, so I've been here a little over 3 years, and this was the toughest weekend on the racetrack for me. And I was honestly kind of surprised at like how devastated I was Sunday night because, unlike the partners, we get to live vicariously through all the horses. So like generally, I'm just speaking for myself here. The losses are hard, but there's another horse running tomorrow or the next day. But this was like three A-list horses that we have very, very high expectations for. And just, Sandman ran okay. The other two didn't run a step. The biggest surprise to me was Super Corredora with how well she had been training. And this is just like it's a reminder for everybody, for us, for the partners that you really got to soak it in when you do have those high notes, like we did in the Breeders' Cup, like we did in the Arkansas Derby last year, because there are so many valleys to this game and it'll punch you in the gut. It just, they're animals and they're not guaranteed to show up and do what you expect them to do every time. My bank account over the years from betting on horses will tell you that too. It's just, you have to have a thick skin and a strong stomach for this game, and that's why you really really got to hold on to those moments of pure joy and elation and accomplishment, because something like this is always in the cards.
Well said. I had the thought too Monday morning, especially because I woke up feeling a little down for sure. And I was just like, this game, like this weekend was further proof this game is not for everybody. We know this is not an inexpensive hobby. They're very fragile animals to begin with, even getting them to the starting gate. It's just not for everybody. Somebody wins basically one out of four races. That's like a Hall of Fame worthy career, which means you're also basically losing three out of four. Tom Murphy, I mean, just tying a ribbon around the group as a whole, really from Friday through Sunday. If there is a silver lining, aside from the horse's past accomplishments, and even my wife Christina was trying to cheer me up. She's like, how hard it is to make these races, and participation on these in these huge stakes, which is true to an extent, but at least physically, Tom Murphy, all three horses, the three stars, if you will, of last weekend. The good news is all three of them seem to have come out of the race physically in good shape.
Yeah, no doubt. Which I think is something that is always good to look at when, we had the results that we had, obviously across the board, fairly disappointing. But at least for me, looking forward, obviously Sandman, we've seen him at his best before, and I think we can get him back there. He's a kind of horse that needs a setup, if you will, needs something to run at. Obviously, he's done his best work doing so. So, and that was also his first off the layoff. So I can be a little bit more forgiving with him. Counting stars, we've seen her throw, clunker before, if you will, she did at Keeneland, and she bounced out of that race and came back to fire two wins. So I'm wondering if that is just something that's her. Maybe it's she's a little more in and out than maybe previously we had thought. And we'll see her bounce back next out, hopefully. But I know she's back perfectly fine. I know, Joe, you heard from Cassie, got a video from Caden back training. She's doing great. And then Super C. Obviously, think that was probably the toughest pill to swallow over the weekend. And just having a short field, obviously, I think the other horses knew exactly what we wanted to do and rode us accordingly, and really got us tired. But I think hopefully we'll be able to bounce back fine with her, with big goals and aspirations for her moving forward. But also do want to give a shout out to Caden Gold being there for breaking his maiden finally. It's been a long journey with him, and shout out Heather Smolin. She's done a great job, and obviously Caden's Gold partners and Jason especially know how long of a journey it's been to get this horse in the winter circle. But it was rewarding to see him finally get there.
Yeah, he ran really, really well on Friday. Got a respectable, more than respectable number. Came out of the race in good shape. So congrats to him. And yeah, we're fans of Heather. We know how difficult this game is, even at times for Hall of Fame trainers. Let alone somebody like Heather, who's a great horsewoman trying to build up her stable. Does not, train a lot of star power. So for her to, really get hands on with Cajun Gold, get him healthy and over all those issues, and for it to work out, that was pretty awesome. Joe, quick, tie up with Pillar of Beauty and Garden of Grace, who started the week. They both ran Thursday. I think for Pillar, not that she ran awful, just not as well as she did first out. And I think we kind of got the concrete evidence. A lot of us probably thought with Garden of Grace that she's just better on the grass.
Yeah, just real quick on Cajun Gold, I want to say, that's one of those situations where you like to see a partnership rewarded for their patience, because it had just been so many starts and stops and races not going and minor issues and all that. And that's where, the how seasoned you are and how your ability to roll with the punches really comes in handy, and you love to see that rewarded. One other minor thing, is that the shortest neck you've ever seen in your life? That horse won by a neck, excuse me.
Yeah,
Like,
dude, it was not quite a nose. I'm gonna call it like a half a head. Dude, put it this
yeah,
way:
like
it
that.
was closer to a nose, far closer, like
Yeah,
Grand Canyon close, than
yeah.
compared to a neck. That's a good point.
I know it's a little pedantic of me, but I just saw that. I was like, "What? In what world did he win by a neck?" But no, so that was great and very rewarding. And I see that he got a 79 buyer too, which is pretty nice. Like that's enough. That's good enough to win. Certainly a Florida bred allowance, maybe even a state bred stake at some point. So that's encouraging. Yeah, on the other two, I thought Garden of Grace, she ran better than she had in the previous race. As you said, she's not a dirt horse. I thought she tried hard all the way to the wire. I thought Flavia did a good job beating out that other horse for third, because it's a significant difference between third and fourth. And we just cross our fingers that is the turf course is open as soon as possible in New York. It's going to be tough with the winter weather, but of course this is the last several months in history of the Aqueduct turf course. So you would hope that they're not going to be as protective of it as they usually are. And just real quick on the betting in that race, that was
Sick,
absolutely nuts.
sick.
And I'm like kicking myself. I had a couple of bucks on the four, but I feel like I should have bet like $1,000 on the four to win, because that was the horse that they meant to bet, I'm
Yep,
sure,
no
not the
doubt.
two. And the 4-1 on that horse, like you won't see better value than that like all year long. That was just wild to watch. And yeah, it was funny because it was the first race with like the new CAW restrictions, and then they immediately were like, actually, wait a minute, we need to make some technical upgrades. So that was short lived. But yeah, I thought she ran fine. Just needs grass, and she's an honest filly, and she deserves a win this spring. And then Pillar of Beauty, it was a different trip. She was able to sit off the pace on the rail at the first time out, and then this time she was under the gun straight from the jump, and understandably got a little tired. And real quick, Ted Myers, the first horse I picked on this podcast,
Oh
wins.
yeah,
Where
dude, I
was my
forgot about
thank
that.
you? Where was my thank you
Yes.
tags, Ted?
Come on, Ted. That's right. I totally would, the Philly losing and everything. I completely forgot, Joe. Yes, that was a Joe Bianca special with I'm airmailing this over to Fort Myers for Mr. Ted.
Please,
So yeah,
please.
I'm gonna break his chops as soon as we wrap up. He's gonna get a little text from me for sure.
Thank you.
Just tying it up with Garden of Grace, like I do love the fact for like some random state bred maiden special weight in the dead of like the coldest winter in the last half century up there. Not to mention like race one on a Thursday. Like I will, because of the betting, you guys, I will remember that race for the like that was something we may never see again in terms of just what happened in terms of the pools in that race. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it was funny because Tommy B called me, like I was up in the winner's circle watching the race. And usually when he calls me when Garden of Grace is about to run, I'm like, oh God, what stupid thing did she do now that I missed? But he was calling me to say, did you see someone just put 100 grand on the two horse in this race? So Tommy's always on it.
So sick. Indeed, he is. Liberty's champion who ran last Friday. He needs a drop in class. I mean, he was almost 50 to 1. Kind of just I want to watch what I say, but yeah, it was a pretty tough spot for him going in. We're 42-1. He ran 10th. He needs, I would be looking like maiden 50, or better yet, probably maiden 35 for him. He just needs to run against easier horses.
Mhm.
The good news again, getting on to Friday's race at Oaklawn with Counting Stars. She's fine coming out of it. And Joe, like in terms of trainers, I was thinking about this like Friday night when you had let everybody know you spoke with Mark, and he basically said she's fine. She didn't bleed. She didn't displace. I think she did pretty much the same thing she did in her second start at Keeneland, which was just stop. Then she, of course, would come back to win 2 stakes. But outside of like Cassie and maybe a guy like Ken McPeak, assuming they're happy with how the horse is training off just a disastrous kind of race, they're like, in this day and age, maybe the only two guys I could think of that would not shy away from just putting a horse in like the next major stake or prep on that circuit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So she's, assuming she trains well and stays healthy, she's going to run in the Honeybee on March 1st. And yeah, I agree. Like,
Washington
I love
and
guys like that who are they are not afraid to race their horses and they don't get spooked by one bad race. Well, in this case, this is the second time she's done this, and she bounced back from the first one. But yeah, like I don't I don't like the reflexive, oh well, they ran badly, so they must need 4 months off. Like if the horse
Mm-hmm.
is healthy and seems to be training forwardly, like why not just put them back in there? So yeah, I totally agree, and I love that old school mentality.
Along the lines, and Cassie, I mean, Mark has just been just crushing it pretty much everywhere. I mean, his barn at Gulfstream might certainly be above 25%, maybe even in the 30% range, high 20s. And at Oaklawn, I mean, he crushed last weekend. Wound up winning the Martha Washington with Search Party, who I got to say, in 2020 hindsight, we were way over bet at 3-5. Like,
Totally.
way
Oh yeah.
disgustingly overbet at 3-5. Winter Search Party, we had mentioned her last week, another gun runner filly who's gotten good. Wasn't gonna really call up. There's no point in like showing her race, but it's probably a point to show what you call Sandman's race here. And moving on to Saturday, Tom Murphy. We're pocketed up. I was pretty pleased actually, even though he's got like nowhere to go. Just the amount of speed that he had, where he was up in the bridle. Unfortunately, just never really had a lot of room to kind of stretch out and do his thing.
Yeah, you covered. I mean, I was surprised too. Heck, I actually missed the race live, so I had to go catch the replay. And I was surprised with how much speed he showed too. I mean, I would have expected him, at this point in the race to be trailing the two and looking to try to make up some ground late. But he stuck his nose up in there. You can see it right here. He just stuck behind the wall. There's nowhere to go. And once something does finally open up for him, he doesn't have that huge instantaneous turn of foot. He's kind of more of that grindy type, very Tappet-esque, if you will, just looking and waiting for a hole and kind of grinds just really makes horses are
Very
kind of
one
down early.
pace, like
Yes,
very, very one
and
pace with
just you
him.
can see it
It's
right here. The two ends up making up some ground on the outside. Right about here, he starts to come close down in the three a little bit, but it's just too little, too late. But it was nice to get him, off the bench and back racing. And I think he should take some step forward, using this race off the layoff. I think he's one too that really does well when he's able to run more and get this built back up into him.
So, Joe, I mean, we move ahead to whatever his next start is. I know you shared yesterday. Here's a little teaser for the Thursday update. Razorback potentially in play, or maybe an allowance race. Mark told you I'd love to get a win. I do feel, not that it's the end of the world that he got beat on Saturday, but he's kind of on the precipice a little bit. It's like, well, which path are we going? Are you going to be a legit top older horse, or just an okay, nice horse this year?
Yeah, no doubt. And I feel like the next race is, by the way, this was where the race was lost. Not that he was going to win anyway, but when the four beat Jose to the spot, and I love Jose Ortiz, when the four beat us to that hole, that was it. There was no chance he was winning after that. But yeah, I mean, he's at a turning point for sure. He's at a crossroads in his career where, he showed all this promise as a 2-year-old and early as a 3-year-old. kind of tailed off the rest of his 3-year-old year. I give him a little bit of an excuse for this race because of the bit of traffic trouble, because it was his first race off the layoff. And Tommy makes a good point that, he's not the kind of horse that, when a hole opens, he's going to be there in one jump. Like you got to get him going earlier than, where you want to go. And yeah, I would love to see him become the true grade one horse that, we thought he was early in his 3-year-old year. I do kind of lean towards what Mark is thinking where, yeah, the Razorback, 500 grand, really nice purse and a track that he likes. But I feel like this is a horse that needs a confidence builder. And he just has been lagging back and, not picking up his feet as well as we thought he could in his last handful of races. So, if there is a 3 other than or 4 other than allowance, whatever condition he is, that pops up in the next month or so, I might be more inclined to send him there just because, it's a long year. And if he does get back on track and he does get a win and he does, run, let's say, like a buyer in the high 90s, there's no shortage of handicap division races that he can run in the rest of the year. I think the most important thing is to get his mind right and to get him, kind of get on a little bit of a roll because it just feels like we've been swimming upstream with him the last handful of starts.
Yeah, well said there, my friend. And as far as Super Corredora guys, again, not that she needed to win, and as great as her Breeders' Cup was, and it was, I mean, the whole thing was a storybook. I'll speak for all of us, in terms of like my racing, my life at the racetrack, one of the greatest moments of my life, and I've been blessed to have, a lot of those. That's how good it was. No one's going to convince me otherwise. As well as she ran Breeders' Cup Friday, that the racetrack did not have something to do with it. Like she got the great ride from Berrios, all of it, and it all worked out. And that had been, kind of like a gnat swimming around in my mind in her big rematch with Explorer and Meaning. And I could tell Joe on the backside, not only were they rolling, but when Meaning kind of switched out from the pocket and got up, basically on our right flank, to me, it looked like we were probably in trouble, and they still had a good half mile or so to go in the actual race.
Dude, I was getting like horrible deja vu because it was like the exact same thing that happened with Counting Stars. Like she didn't stop as badly as Counting Stars did, obviously, but it was the same scenario where about a half mile out, you see the horse move up to our outside, and we just instantly don't go with that horse. And then you're like, how many horses have you seen go on from there to win the race? Like it just hardly ever happens when you get out punched to that far turn and end up dropping back. And yeah, I agree with you that I do think the Breeders' Cup race was a little bit dressed up. I think that's somewhat negated by that she did set a pretty fast pace in that race. As I said, I think this was the most disappointing of the three because, Counting Stars had missed some training. You could use that potentially as a minor excuse. Sandman off the layoff. She had been Super Corridor's works at
Like
San
a bear,
Antonio were like
like a bear. Her
incredible.
works were insane.
Yeah. And if I'm gonna nitpick, I would say I thought Barrios should have sent because he did a good job getting over to the rail going to the first turn, and then he let the rail wide open going onto the backstretch. It's like, and I don't want to criticize too much because he obviously rode her brilliantly in the Breeders' Cup. He's a really good rider, but like I just hate those rides where it's like you can't play it both ways. You either got to take back or you got to go. And I just hate seeing rides where guys send and then pull. And I'm like, dude, you got to pick one or the other. And it probably wouldn't have mattered. She just didn't have it that day. She probably would have finished last. But I would have been much more comfortable seeing her loose on the lead down the backstretch than dueling with Explorer the whole way.
So what do we do? Like Joe, and I know you are going to talk with John and Juan later today. I mean, do you say I don't really want to run against another 4 or 5 horse field against Meaning and Explorer and the Santa Anita Oaks? Do we take her on the road? I mean, where's your head at with her?
Putting aside the possibility that the Santa Anita Oaks will have 4 horses and the points will get downgraded, let's assume that they have an actual field out there for once. She's the kind of filly that I would not throw another obstacle at. Like, I do think that she's a little finicky, like Counting Stars. She doesn't have her A game or her mind on business all the time. I'm not afraid. I don't know about you guys. I'm not afraid of any of the 3-year-old fillies out there. Like the Colts division looks pretty stacked. None of the fillies have been all that impressive to me. Even including Zany, who's a nice filly, for Mike and one at Tampa. I didn't think like that she was any kind of world beater in that race. So, all things being equal and me not being afraid of any particular 3-year-old filly, I would keep her home and let her run out of her stall.
Okay. All right. I'm glad she's okay. I'm glad everybody's okay post race. Gardner Grace, Pillar of Beauty, Cajun Gold, and Counting Stars, Sandman, and Super Corridor. So we turn the page. We've got actually some nice action coming up, guys. Rachel Alexandra, named for that great Hall of Famer, will never, ever, ever. I don't like speaking generally in absolutes or sure things, but we will never see a 3-year-old filly, do what Rachel Alexandra did her 3-year-old season. That will never happen again. I mean, just incredible. So nice. She's not a horse as much as I loved her when she was racing. It's weird. I don't think about her maybe as often as some of the other horses that have come in and out of my life. So it was nice to see her name in the program. We've got Powered by Family running Saturday at Fairgrounds for Cherie DeVoe. We bred her and co-bred her with Vinnie Viola, St. Elias Stables, and she, for a horse that was pretty backwards, Tom Murphy, earlier in her life, and which is why she didn't go through an auction ring. She came to hand last year and pretty impressive maiden win. And I thought, Tommy, overall, like a pretty good spot to see how she is first start against winners. Like there was no one in there that really put the fear of God in me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of sums up that race, and I think why she fits so well in there. There's no one that you're really looking at in the entry box saying, "Oh man, I really don't want to run against them." But she surprised me first out. I was at Churchill that day when she debuted, going short sprinting, and I don't think anyone really had any idea what to expect from her. And she closed from pretty well back that day, and then obviously broke her maiden next out. So I think from pretty early on. I can't believe that it was only 48 on debut at Churchill. That's besides the point. But her race last out was just awesome, and I think she's stretching out really is what helped her too. She's a horse in quality road. They love to go long. She's bred to do it out of an Empire Maker mare. So, but this race, I think it's a good little test for her to kind of see where she stacks up with some of these other horses. Consider the top 3-year-old in this part of the country here, and I'm looking forward to seeing what she's got for us and see if maybe we can have a little bit of fun with her this spring.
I mean, outside of Powered by Family, the Goldenrod fillies led by the Godolphin Street Sense homebred Bella Ballerina. I mean, she looks pretty solid. But overall, this will be a good spot to try winners and try to get some points on what'll hopefully culminate a march towards the Kentucky Oaks. Bouncing to Sunday, guys. And we may have Creed's Vision. If they use his race at Tampa on Saturday, which we hope they do, we'll have some action out on the west coast of Florida. But on my turf on Sunday, we've got a couple of horses running, a colt and a filly. And Joe, it could be a very memorable weekend for Icon Project, who's the dam of Powered by Family, and of course also the dam of Statesman, who's going to get that rematch in race number 8 Sunday at the Gulf against Stees. They looked like the main two to me.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because like she had seemed like kind of like a dud as a broodmare until like the last 2 years, and then somehow we ended up with the only two good horses that she's thrown, and in back-to-back crops. I'm very, very interested in this race for Statesman because as you said, it's not a bunch of killers in here. I think Steez, I think also Only in America for Todd is a little interesting after running second to Accelerize last time out, came back and won the Louisiana Stakes. I think this is a race, that last race, that 91 buyer, honestly, I think that's low. And I think it's a result of the pace being so slow that they can only come home so fast, especially on dirt. I think he actually ran better than the figure looks, even though the figure was a huge jump up from his previous top. And yeah, very, very interesting horse because he's a horse that, first couple of starts were like, wow, we are in big trouble with him.
Yep.
And then, he comes to hand at Tampa, runs poorly in the Wood Memorial. So you're thinking, all right, did he just love the Tampa racetrack? Would he just get fat on some soft competition? That last race was extremely promising. And I think he could honestly be a handicap division horse later this year if he steps up second off the layoff here.
He might be. I mean, it's a long road and he's got to do it, but he came out of the race in good shape. And it's nice seeing a horse that ran January 17th and he's right back in on February 15th. I'm glad the race went, and good luck to Statesman. The big three are certainly post 1, 2, and 3. The rest of these horses look just not as good on paper. And then speaking of not looking so great, I found for Miss Enchanted's return in her first start since right around this time last May at Churchill Downs. There were some horses in here that were immediate throwouts, but two things Tom Murphy surprised me a little bit because it took like a week for this race to finally go. It was the amount of horses that entered. It's not a 5 or 6 horse allowance field. And as I worked my way outside, I'm like, oh man, the Cox filly, but especially Nick Style, they're legit. Nick Style to me looks pretty solid in this race against Miss Enchanted.
Yeah, the race came up, like you, I was surprised it was this full because it did take a couple goes through the racing office for it to actually get used. But I'm looking forward to getting Miss Enchanting back in action. She may need the race off the layoff, but that may not be the case. And all credit to Dale, he's been having a great meet down there so far, and hopefully we can stay hot with him. But like you, I looked at the that outside horse and Mount Horse, and I think she's going to be the clear-cut favorite. She obviously loves Gulfstream. I don't think she's been worse than second there. It's right there with 5 career starts. Just she's the horse that is going to be overwhelmingly bet as I would
probably
imagine
odds on. If not odds
Yeah,
on, she's like a tick above. Like, you're looking at 6 to 5 even money on her. She's legit, dude. It's going to
yeah,
be a good test.
extremely.
Yeah.
She was second to Ways and Means back in September 24. There's some really really nice horses back there in those running lines. So, but overall, I'm just happy to have Miss Enchanted back, and let's get her back rolling. Get her one, or maybe we can squeeze another one into her down at Gulfstream and get her ready to fire back up in my neck of the woods in Kentucky in the spring.
Yeah, I think that, typically is the MO of, the Romans operation. It's like have as good a Gulfstream as you possibly can, but really the goal is to have them primed and ready to roll for Keeneland and beyond between Kentucky in the springtime. And then, guys, we've got the Ozark on Monday, and I like our post show with Ewing. First off, I'm thrilled to see him back. I think this horse is uber. I know he's unbeaten. He's a graded stakes winner, all that obvious stuff. I got a soft spot for Ewing. So aside from just the overall just emotions of seeing his name in the entries, because it's been a minute, dude, we're towards the outside and as far as post goes, which that gets a big check mark for me. And what'd you think about the race? I think this is kind of like I'm not saying it's easy, and especially after last weekend, but like this is the kind of race you'd put together if you were able to like handpick a group of like 3-year-old stakes horses. Am I right in saying that? Like for Ewing to face?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like it kind of looks like it's a restricted stake, like for horses that have never won whatever, but it's an open stake. And I think it's a great spot for several reasons. I love that he's drawn outside, and then you do have speed from both the 1 and the 2. And you got to think that they're both going to send from inside post. I think this will be a good test for him, just to see how he runs, like his style, because Mark's main concern with him is that he's a runoff speed. And obviously that's a great thing as a 2-year-old sprinting in the summer. Not so great if you want to go longer as a 3-year-old. And, just being perfectly frank, I think, the Derby at this point is kind of out of the question. He just has too much. He has too much conditioning and too much, foundation to make up, I think, on the horses that are already on the Derby trail. But, if you want to go in the Pat Day mile, it's kind of the same principle. Like you don't want to be running off going 22:44 flat in that race. You want to be able to sit if you can. So I love that we drew outside, not just for his chances to win the race, but for our chances to see, hey, can he settle and can he be a little bit more professional and not just a runoff speed horse?
Well, good luck to Ewing. Good luck to all of our horses, guys. In terms of Creed's vision, again, they'll draw that race and hopefully they use it. And, we're about a month out from OBS March, which is pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, man, it's exciting. And I was actually looking back at what we bought last March. We bought 5 horses, and Abrogado probably not a ton of horse, but the other ones, Feeling Groovy, Curtain Call, Into the Beast, and of course I'm forgetting one. But all four out of the five are all pretty. Oh, Paige Turner, how could I forget her? So four out of those five horses have like pretty big promise as 3-year-olds. So it's exciting going into the first sale of the year, no matter what, but especially after how well we did last year at that sale.
Yeah, we'll look to do that again. Look forward to whether it's at the races and or the sales. Look forward to hopefully seeing everybody in person. It's always good hopping on with you guys. We'll turn the page. Let's go get them this weekend, and we'll catch you next time right here on WPT in 20.